Hi, everyone. Welcome to Vermont Independent Media's Media Mentoring Program. And tonight we're going to talk about how to be an informed voter, cutting through the spin and disinformation. This program will explore the impact disinformation has on elections, how citizens can cut through the noise to find accurate and credible information about the candidates and the election process, and the role state officials and the media can play in protecting election integrity. And I'm Joyce Marcel. I've been a Vermont journalist for about 33 years now. Our panelists tonight are, we're very lucky to have Secretary of State Jim Condos. We're going to have Gyuri Kepes, the Assistant Professor of Communications at Landmark College, and Olga Peters, a freelance journalist and host of the Montpelier Happy Hour podcast. So welcome, everyone. And I think we will all learn something tonight. I think we're going to hear some stuff that we haven't heard before. But we're going to start with you, Jim, and just give us an overview of how the process works, the voting process. And it's a two-part process, isn't it? You either vote on election day or you vote by mail.
First of all, let me just say that voting is really the fundamental process that causes us to have our democracy. It's how we decide, how we as voters decide directly who represents us in government. And often we have the opportunity to vote directly on local issues or something as big as amendments to our Constitution like this year. So the premise is pretty simple. One person, one vote. Every voter gets one ballot. And when they make their selections, that vote is carefully counted with all the other votes to give us our election result. In this upcoming November 8th general election, we've made it easy. We've mailed a ballot to all active registered voters. So for any voter who has their ballot, it's as easy as sign, seal, and send. Voters really need to pay attention, obviously, to the instructions that are included with their ballot, which includes placing the voted ballot after you vote it into the ballot envelope, signing the certificate on the outside of that envelope, putting the signed envelope within the mailing envelope, which has got an address of your town clerk, and then returning that ballot to the town clerk. And you can do it either by mail, you can do it in person, you can do it by dropping it off at a drop box if it's available, or you can bring it on election day to your polling place. And so we really, what I like to say about the vote by mail is that vote by mail is just adding another option for our voters to make it easier for them to be able to fill out their ballots and mail them. If you think about what was it like 50, 60, 70 years ago, when everybody would go on election day to vote, if you couldn't make it for whatever reason, you were out of luck. And since that time, things have really changed. Here in Vermont, we have 45 days of early voting. For instance, it started the last week of September. We mailed out ballots leading up to the October 1st. And if someone did not get a ballot because they newly registered or they have moved, whatever the reason might be, if you didn't receive a ballot by now, you should probably contact your local town clerk and find out if they can send you one. As far as the election votes themselves, the polls will close at 7 p.m. That hasn't changed. It closes across the state at 7 p.m. At that time, the ballots will be counted. Generally, there are towns that there are about 150 out of the 247 towns that have vote tabulators. The town clerks will end the election, flip the key to a certain location, and it'll total the ballots that have gone through that machine. The rest of the towns are going to do hand counts, so sometimes that can take longer. But generally, we have by midnight that night, we usually have unofficial election night results that have been provided to us by the clerks, and you can go to our election night reporting site on our website. And just to make it clear, the town clerks are the ones that are responsible for conducting the election locally. In the 48 to 72 hours after the election, they will carefully review the numbers that they have and then certify those at their local, county, and state level, and then send those to us. And this ensures that the official results are accurately reflected as the will of the voters. So that's kind of really what the process is. Within 30 days of the election, so by the end of November, early December, we will hold a randomly selected set of towns that we will audit the ballots top to bottom, every race on that ballot, to confirm whether the votes matched up. So we have many processes in place. We have a very secure election process, and we look forward. This is kind of our Super Bowl, so we sort of look at it. It's everything for us leads up to November 8th, and you know we've been preparing now for almost a year to get to this point. So I'll stop there. And Joyce, I don't know if you have anything else you want to ask.
Well, is what we do in Vermont different than other states?
Actually, it is. The voting process is actually run by the states. The U.S. Constitution actually says that the states run the elections, but some of my colleagues who are strict constitutionalists seem to forget the second half of that same sentence, which also says that Congress can make changes. They want to leave everything to the states, and that way, as we all know, in some states, there have been a lot of restrictions placed on voting that actually suppress the vote. Vermont's different. We've actually gone the other direction, so much so that there was a recently, and I lost track of the name of it, but there was a academic study that was done of all 50 states, and Vermont was ranked the third most voter-friendly state in the country. But also in the last two presidential elections, 2016 and 2020, Vermont was ranked first in the country for election administration by MIT's Election Performance Index. And they've been doing that, I think, since 2006 or 2008. And it's a highly regarded data-driven measure of state election performance. So we're pretty pleased at our positioning. We really strive to make it easier for people to vote while maintaining our integrity and our security.
There's been, especially this year, some, I wouldn't say attacks on the voting process, but attempts to throw a monkey wrench into them, certainly. And I think Vermont has not been as affected as other places, but we have seen some of that. Could you describe what is going on there?
Well, yeah, and I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but it's really, I think you were right to say attacks. There are attacks against elections. There are election deniers who are running for Secretary of State in many states. There are election deniers who are running for the governor in some of those states, and it really is a concern. You know, I don't like to get partisan in my role as Secretary of State, but it's insidious lies that have been coming from the former president and his allies that you know, raise questions as to whether the vote was accurate in 2020. I mean, you know, President Trump is still arguing that he won the election in 2020, and there is absolutely not one shred of evidence that that occurred. So we're, you know, we've done our due diligence, and I think in many states they are making it more restrictive. They've gerrymandered their districts to ensure that minorities are essentially locked out of the. They're allowed to vote, but they're put into positions, into districts that there's no question who's going to win. And it kind of is, from my standpoint, and I speak as a second generation American. All four of my grandparents came from overseas, and you know, to me, it really hurts to see what's going on around the country.
Oh, I agree with you. Could you just explain something? How can an election denier run for office? What is an election?
Anybody can run for office, just like anybody can file a lawsuit.
But if you win, how do you win or lose if you're denying the election?
You know, the former president has kind of turned all that on its head, that lies don't seem to matter anymore. The truth doesn't matter anymore. That we can say whatever we want. I do think it's difficult from my standpoint as an longtime election official. Just, you know, for your audience, you know, I served 18 years on a city council. I served 8 years in the state senate, and now I've served 12 years as Secretary of State. So I know a little something about elections. Knock on wood, I've never lost one. So that's the good news. But I do think that there's certainly a lot of mistrust right now. And, you know, when I hear people say, well, the elections, you know, it's all over the news that you know, it's not truthful. It's not, you know, that there's voter fraud. Well, it's all coming from one person, basically. And he's pushed it out to the rest of his allies across the country and through some of the TV stations. And you know, we are quick to point out that people, you know, you should not trust social media. Social media can amplify very quickly. A mistruth can be shared instantaneously and can reach hundreds, thousands, or sometimes even millions of people in just a very few short minutes. We hope that people will look to trusted official sources to verify the information that you're seeing. We've got a working relationship with Facebook and Twitter. If we see something that we think is clearly wrong, we will notify them. And I think it's just, you know, it's really concerning. I mean, I think the biggest thing that we've had to experience, and I know that some of you are aware, but, you know, we received death threats here at our office. Comments were made like, you should just put the gun in your mouth and pull the trigger, make it easy on yourself. You should, you know, you're going to get effing popped. You know, we had one of our staff people actually end up with PTSD symptoms and had to take a leave of absence to get some very serious counseling. You know, we've probably had to add about $20,000 or $30,000 worth of security to our building. There are these lies create problems beyond what we have normally had to face, and I've never seen anything like it. And you know, I always tell people that, listen, I'm elected. People can say what they want to me, but to attack my election staff, or even worse, election workers at the local level, is really uncalled for just doing their jobs. People just trying to do their jobs for their neighbors. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I have to admit that I'm shocked. And for the decent voters of Vermont, I apologize for this horrible, horrible thing that's happening to you. Are you anticipating violence?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are you anticipating violence or any kind of disruption in this election?
Well, I'm not anticipating it, but I will tell you that we've been in touch with law enforcement. We have a law enforcement team from the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, the Vermont State Police, local police sources, law enforcement sources, as well as state's attorneys and the attorney general, and we keep them informed. You know, one of this individual who made 2 sets of death threats over the last year or so is under surveillance. They were able to find him finally, and they are watching him. They don't think he will be taking any action after they visited him. But I think that, you know, the problem is we don't know, Joyce. You know, when I walk out of the door of this building at night, I don't know who's out there on the sidewalk.
Wow. I'm sure that there are Secretary of State's organizations. Are you in touch with other Secretary of States around the country, and are they feeling the same way you are?
Well,
Or are we split into 2 parts of Secretary of State-dom, where one part is disrupting and the other isn't?
well, we do have the National Association of Secretaries of State, and I served as its president, I think in 2017 or 18, I forget now. But it's the oldest nonprofit government agency association, and you know, we really try to maintain nonpartisanship at that organization. And it's, you know, the Republicans have about 26 secretaries, and we have about 24 or something like that. But you know, we really try to, you know, like all of our committees are chaired by Republican and a Democrat. When we bring up resolutions, they have to have a Republican and Democrat support to bring up a resolution. So we really try to maintain it that way. But I can tell you that some of my colleagues, Jocelyn Benson in Michigan, she had 24/7. She probably still has 24/7 security. If you remember, in Michigan, the governor, there was a plot to kidnap and kill the governor. My colleague in Colorado has had, I don't think she does now, but she has had security when specific threats have come in. So we have some of that, and I want to be clear, it's not just the Democratic secretaries, because Brad Raffensperger, the secretary from Georgia, who was in the news a lot after the last election for, even though he admitted that he supported Donald Trump, but he was not going to kowtow to him and break the law and violate the Constitution of either the United States or the state of Georgia. And so he had a lot of threats, death threats. And, you know, this is a new level that we've never seen before.
Well, thank you very much for explaining all this to us. It's not easy to hear. And I'm sure that there's nothing that we as citizens can do except vote. Or is there? Maybe I'm missing something.
Well, no, I think you're exactly right. I mean, our voice is our vote, and we just need to. I know there are groups here in Vermont that are sending postcards to citizens in some of these places where there's election deniers to try to make, you know, sending postcards to a list and in hopes of convincing people not to vote for these election deniers. You know, all of our processes, that they may be different across the country, but all of our processes are to maintain the integrity of our elections. That is the basis of our democracy, and we really need to focus on that.
Right. Okay, let's talk to Olga. You there, Olga?
I am. Good to see you, Joyce.
Okay. Hi. Well, you and I talked this afternoon, and I think that what I wrote down from that was democracy works on trust. And we've just heard some really scary stuff. that leaves me almost speechless. So I'm going to ask you to talk about.
Take it from there.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate what you said, Secretary Condos, about sharing some of the difficulties that your office is facing right now, because I do feel that with voting, it is one of the ways that we hold our elected officials accountable. One of the ways we can say, you haven't done a good job. We're voting for someone else. And that is one side of democracy, is holding our systems accountable. And goodness knows we have plenty to hold our systems accountable for. But the other side of that, and I think it's an overlooked side of democracy, is how much of it relies on trust. That we trust that that when our vote goes into that box, it is counted, and it is counted accurately, is such a huge part of the voting process, and the democratic process, democratic with a little d. And for me, I think that is what I see getting chipped away at with a lot of what's happening now at the national stage. And I don't know if we can put it all at the feet of the Trump administration, but I think it's definitely reared its very ugly head since the Trump administration is just chipping away at people's trust in their elected officials, in their democratic systems. I think that's something we just need to name and keep on and keep saying every year, like, okay, so how are we going to maintain this trust in our system? I think in Vermont, we're fairly lucky because a lot of our elected officials, whether it's a school board or a select board or library trustees, are fairly close to us. And we have pretty good access to them. I think we're very lucky that way. But where do we go from there, from finding good information? Would you like me to segue to that, Joyce? Or
I would love you to segue to that. And Jerry has some interesting ideas himself. So we'll.
Oh, good. I can't wait. I would just say, a lot of people ask me as a journalist, like, how do I evaluate these elected officials? And I would just always, my rule of thumb is to try to get as many sources as you can, to get your news from so many places. Because I often feel that quality of information is often found in the aggregate, that you get a little bit from the New York Times, you get a little bit from Vermont Public, you get a little bit from Vermont Digger, you get a little bit from the Boston Globe, a little bit from the Guardian. And it's all of that put together is where I think you get the best information. Now, of course, we all have no time, no patience, and don't always know where to start. So I sympathize with folks' difficulty there. The other rule of thumb I would offer people is to try to get your information from more than one medium. So print and watching, say, a televised debate, and maybe listening to a radio story, because each medium is better at disseminating and analyzing information differently. And so I think you can just pick up more nuances by getting your information through different types of media. The last thing I would say when it comes to evaluating information, most journalists who really want to provide strong information will put their information out in such a way that you can follow the breadcrumbs. So if they mention like a report that was put out by a certain elected official, you should be able to find that report and read it for yourself if you want to. And so if you're finding news sources where they don't have information that you can then follow, or they're referencing information that you can't find elsewhere, I often feel that that can be a red flag, as far as, that could be like opinion starting to masquerade as a hard news story. I hope that wasn't too babbling.
No, that was interesting. Do you think you could break down what media is best for what? You mentioned that before that each media. What would like radio be?
Right. Well, I'll start with print only because that's what came to my head first. So
Sure.
I feel like print media, whether it's a magazine article or a newspaper article, is really good for dense information, because you can put it down and process the information and then come back to it. So especially if you're reading something with a lot of numbers or a lot of maybe terms that you're not familiar with, I think it's really good for that. Where I feel like television, especially like a televised debate between candidates, I feel is very good at kind of watching how people respond under pressure, which I think is a really important factor to consider when you're electing someone. When a crisis gets thrown at them, are they going to fold or are they going to rise to the occasion? And I think that's something that TV is very good for. And then radio, I think is very good for information, but it's also, I think radio imparts emotions in a different way. And I wish I had a better definition for that, but I feel that radio kind of bridges that getting to sit with something like you can with print media, and then the immediacy of the source. You get to hear the source's voice. I feel radio kind of bridges those two. Did that help?
Okay. A little bit. You need to prepare for that question, I think. Another thing that you mentioned earlier when we talked is that politics in Vermont is so small and personal that you can probably connect with the candidate if you want. And I had this experience recently where I had questions about a candidate's behavior. And I hate to say it, I went on social media and we didn't talk about social media. But I just sent him a message and I said, could you explain why you did this, that, and the other thing? Because I'm not sure that I want to vote for you. And I got a very complete answer back almost within 5 minutes. And I thought that was impressive. And this was just a rep in my district, but I got an answer. Now, I can never be sure because I've been doing journalism for so long that he didn't see my name and feel he had to respond. But I think that most candidates, they're walking the streets. They're in gallery walk. You can't get rid of them. They're in your house. They're everywhere, especially in Windham County, which is a small county. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah.
Right here. What could
you say? I think especially like with the November midterm elections or presidential elections, we tend to pay a lot of attention to the national stage. And yet, this is me probably being biased because I covered local politics for so long, or local government, I should say. I actually feel a lot of the things that impact us so directly are decisions that are made at the local level by the school board or the select board or the state house. And so I just always encourage people to reach out to the local candidates or the local incumbents. And if you can't reach them through like their candidate page, their website, remind me, Secretary Condos, there's a place on your website where you can actually find the names and addresses of people who have registered to run.
Yeah, you would actually go to the elections tab and then go to, I'm trying to remember how, I think it goes to voters and then candidates, and then there'll be a link that it's an Excel spreadsheet that you can have to see, how to contact your all these different candidates. It'll be the general election candidates. There's also the primary listing. But we also have on our website a candidate's guide, voter's guide. But I have to say that, we just don't get a lot of candidates that participate as far as providing their information.
Thank you. So the point of that is that there is a lot of ways to find the contact information for people who are running at the local or the state level. What else can I say about that, Joyce, that you think people might find useful?
You want to hit on social media, or do we all want to hit on social media?
Take it in small doses.
The interesting thing, I think, Olga, is it's here and everybody uses some form of it. And that's, I think, the good news and the bad news. And as you said, people can respond relatively quickly. It is, sometimes it's difficult. And I know I typically do not like getting into debates on social media, because to me it's just like trying to debate via email. I'll provide information and then I usually tell people, give me a call if you want to talk about it. I just think it's very, very difficult to do it in sound bites. But I think, and Olga, you kind of alluded to it, but I think part of the issue that we've seen in the media is the demise of the print media, nationwide. It's not just, it's here in Vermont, but it's nationwide. And I mean, when you look at like the Burlington Free Press, for instance, used to be the state's newspaper. Well, it's really not much more than a Chittenden County newspaper now. It's gotten so small. Their level of customers is gone from like 50,000 to less than 10 now. And it's just, to me, that's a real issue. There used to be 3 reporters in the State House from the Free Press. There used to be 2 or 3 from, maybe even more than that, from Times Argus and some of the other major papers in the state, Rutland Herald, the Times Argus. But now you're lucky if there's one. A lot of times I think, it's different when you get to the local media. I know when I was in Chittenden County, I was very supportive of the weeklies, because as I knew, the weekly, like in South Burlington, the weekly paper would be mailed to every home in the city, and that newspaper would sit on the coffee table until the next issue came a week later. So to me, it was much more viable to get some of your news from that. But when you're talking weekly, then you got deadlines and everything else. So it's difficult.
Going back to, thank you for saying that, Secretary Condos, because I think Joyce and I can both wail about, being under-resourced as journalists. Social media, in a way, it's not good, it's not bad. What it is I think someone said here tonight, it amplifies things, and information flows so quickly through social media. And one of the things about information is it takes time and resources to vet good information. And I think that's where a lot of why sometimes evaluating candidates as a voter can be so hard, because it takes time to read all those news articles. But as a journalist, it takes time to do those interviews and to do that research. And the thing about social media is you don't necessarily have to, if you're just want to bang out opinion, you don't necessarily have to give it time. And it's out there.
I can speak about some of the impacts of social media through my experiences. every day working with college students, and I can say there's really a crisis in information literacy, just the preparedness that students come in at the college level, just not having the ability to evaluate the criteria for credibility or to evaluate the veracity of a claim. And I can say exclusively they're getting their news from Twitter or Instagram or TikTok. And like you said, Olga, not having that the the mosaic that they're drawing from different types of sources. And it was an MIT study that came out recently that said that false news on Twitter spreads faster and wider than real stories, and actually by a significant margin. Like, fake stories were 70% more likely to be retweeted. And there's also kind of this emotional contagion that occurs, like you alluded to, Olga, as well. Negativity is more likely to be shared than positivity. So I call this kind of outrage porn, that people, it kind of amplifies and it amplifies fringe views. So the extremes get amplified on either end. And so students just don't come equipped with those tools. And one thing I'm big on is tools. And so I hope to share a few tools, nonpartisan kind of tools that I found useful in kind of cutting through the noise and finding independent facts on candidates, where you can do kind of a side-by-side comparison of the candidates on their positions, their campaign finance. You can have records of speeches. So it really kind of gives you that picture, that fuller picture. Doesn't mean you shouldn't also access other sources, New York Times and other newspapers of record, and so forth.
You want to start talking about that now? Tell us what tools we need and how we get them.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm really big on independent fact checking. I just to preface it, I don't have any stake in this. I'm not a registered voter in Vermont. I live in Massachusetts. But VT Digger, so I'll put some of these links in the chat. VT Digger has a candidate directory where you can look up any candidate in the state, and it'll those candidates will answer yes or no questions based on 8 issues on healthcare, voting rights, marijuana legalization, term limits, taxation, things like that. There's also a really powerful tool on votesmart.org. They partnered with factcheck.org, and you just type in the name of any 2 candidates, and it gives you that side-by-side comparison. You have statements on the issues. It gives you their kind of special interest ratings, what type of lobbyists and super PACs are donating to the campaigns. And it gives some of their voting history. So yeah, I'll put those in the chat. I think those are really effective tools just to cut through some of the noise and the spin that you see. Just looking over a candidate's website, there's a lot of buzzwords there. There's maybe some dog whistles, words that appealed, like democracy, justice, freedom, which really don't have a lot of substance to them. They're appealing, but just to get behind some of those and see where really the candidates are coming from. So yeah, I'll put those in the chat right now.
Okay, maybe you should explain dog whistles.
So dog whistles are kind of coded words that will appeal to a certain voting population. I think a recent example that Trump uses, bad hombres, it was pretty clear what he meant by that. And he was, speaking to a specific voting population, which had very, another one is inner city, which usually means, Black urban populations, or law and order, to talk about, punitive, incarcerating people. And so those are just kind of those buzzwords again that are used to appeal to certain segments of the population, usually have racist undertones.
Do we have any on the other side?
Dog whistles on the other side? Yeah, feel free to jump. Nothing comes to mind right now, but I'm sure there are.
Okay. I get the New Hampshire stations on my television for some reason, and I get to see the most hateful television ads I've ever seen that are completely false and accusatory and just make me really upset for 3 minutes, and then we go back to the regularly scheduled program. And Maggie Hassan is feeding worms to babies while her opponent is it's just awful. I don't think we have that much in Vermont, but that's because I don't get Vermont stations through Xfinity. So what is there national money and national television ads in Vermont, Jim? I don't really know.
Yeah, there is, and it sort of depends on the races. If you're talking about the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House, we don't monitor those in any way. They don't have to file reports with us for those. We would have the ones for if it's a statewide state race or whatever. But we have. When I first took office in 2010, and I was elected in 2010, took office in 2011, we had a paper-driven system for campaign finance and lobbyist disclosure, for example. And I was told it was going to be extremely difficult and very costly to put something online. Well, by 2015, we were able to put it online so that the candidates could file online relatively easy. We were able to increase the number of filing periods, and people can now go on and download that information into an Excel spreadsheet so that if they want to sort it in certain ways, they can do that. So we've come a long way, but I think at the national level, which we're talking about Maggie Hassan and Don Bolduc. I think really it's what you're seeing is the results of the Citizens United decision that basically said corporations are people and you don't have to file contributions or reports, only the expenditures. So it really became a problem because we don't know. The whole idea behind campaign finance is to know for the general public to know where the money's coming from and how it's being spent. And so much of it is basically hidden out of sight. I think almost Republican or Democrat, almost every congressperson, they meet the test of the local match, or what I shouldn't say local match, the maximum cap on contributions, and I forget what it is at the national level, but what they do is they all have PACs, and these PACs, they have money flowing in from everywhere into these PACs, and what you're seeing is the PACs that are doing some of these ads.
At one point, maybe it's because I'm old, but you couldn't lie like that on television. And this is shocking.
Well, I don't know what the answer is, Joyce. This is where, I just don't know. I mean, what we've seen over the last 4 to 6 years, where out and out lies are being under the guise of First Amendment. That it used to be some of the things that you hear would have been a death knell for a candidate. Today, it doesn't appear to make any difference at all.
I feel like we may be seeing a start of a reckoning with maybe today's landmark lawsuit, the Alex Jones defamation case.
Yeah,
almost $1 billion, and that's almost sure to put deplatform Alex Jones and kind of his disinformation and lies. So maybe the pendulum is swinging in the other direction. I'm hoping that's a positive sign.
Has that case been resolved against Alex Jones?
Today it was, yeah, just came
Yep.
out
Oh,
about an
that.
hour ago that he is ordered to pay almost $1 billion to 8 families that had children killed in Newtown.
That's very heartening. Have you got any other ideas? How do we, I can't imagine students reading all the newspapers and figuring out which part of which story is the right one. It seems like more work than most people would want to put into it. Are there tools or tricks or ways that we can deal with the misinformation? Jerry?
For me, it's just a lot of hard work, high touch work in the classroom. I teach journalism, so we usually go over several drafts with them. I know that not everybody has that kind of time, so it's their drafts are seen by several sets of eyes, and we have everybody do fact checks and just evaluate the veracity of their claims. Really having a background in communication and rhetoric, understanding the art of persuasion, how emotional appeals are used, and things like you said, campaign ads, how eating, would you say, worms? Those kind of emotional appeals really are powerful, and how you can you can become kind of immune to those appeals if you really look at the facts and do your research.
Okay, I think we have a question. So we can take that question or that comment if the BCTV people are awake. There we go.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ricky Rosati, and I am an elected District 8 representative in Brattleboro, Vermont from 2020 till 2023. And I'm also on the Republican ballot for Vermont House Rep. And I am wondering if you have any encouraging advice for organizations that are under like the Political Action Committee 501c3 status that are scared, that feel scared about hosting educational events to inform voters about not just the candidates, but also the articles on the ballot, like Article 22. So in a neutral way, so that they can still keep their status with the IRS and do that legally under like the Vermont and the US Constitution, but still be involved, and not just involved, but maybe like leading that involvement too, rather than like just expecting the news reporters to do all of the work of educating the public. Because like, especially like medical health professionals is what I'm thinking of for Article 22.
Okay, so let's ask Jim Condos that question, I think.
So,
Did you understand?
first of all, our state laws don't get involved in 501c3s, C4, C5s, or 6s. We're agnostic to it because it has nothing to do with Vermont state laws. So, for instance, my corporations system, where you register your business with the state of Vermont, we don't care if you're a C3 or C4 or C5. It just it's nothing that has anything to do with us. I don't believe the tax department is involved in that. That's a federal issue. The 501Cs are federal, and that has nothing to do with Vermont state law, especially in the area of campaign finance or corporate registrations. So I don't know, but I guess this goes back, I think, to what I said earlier, which was that what we need is a system that allows for the public to know where the money's coming from and how it's being spent. And that's what we don't have at this time. We do for state candidates, but not on the federal level.
One thing that our caller mentioned was were the two amendments to the Constitution that are on the ballot. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there are two amendments on the ballot. It went through a very lengthy process to get through to from the legislature. So the legislature, it has to start in the Senate. It has to pass with a 2/3 majority in the Senate. Then it goes to the House. The House has to pass it without any change by a simple majority. Then they have to wait till the next legislature is elected. So it could take up to 4 years. And then they have to basically have a simple majority by both House and Senate in the second legislative attempt. And again, there's no change to any of the law that has been passed up to that point. Once it passes both House and Senate in the second legislative session, then it comes to our office to put on the general election ballot. And we put it on the election ballot exactly as it's written. So we don't make any word changes or highlight changes or anything to it. We put it exactly as it was given to us from the legislature. And that's what's put before the voter. So the voter then votes it up or down. And if it passes, then it will be added to the Constitution, either amending it or adding an amendment to the Constitution, or it could be defeated. And you know, we don't have a say in it. Our role is at the Secretary of State's office is purely administerial. We basically receive the documents. We make sure that the governor has issued the proper notice, that the amendments are on the ballot, which he has done. Then we have to provide that information to the print medium for publication in specific newspapers around the state with general circulation. And again, it has to be like, I don't know, I forget it. I think it's 3 consecutive weeks that it has to go out and be published. And so there's processes that are involved and that we make sure we follow.
Can you just tell us what the two are this year? I know one of them is a woman's right to choose, but I don't know what the second one is.
Yeah, I certainly can. I actually have a ballot right here in front of me. So, or actually, it's not even on this. This is a sample ballot, so it wasn't even on that. It essentially is there's an article about slavery, and then there's an article about abortion, essentially reproductive freedom. And both of those were debated heavily in the State House, and you know, have passed both bodies and are now on the ballot.
So hopefully one of them is against slavery, right?
That's right. It's actually to clarify what the law says. The current U.S. Vermont Constitution, everybody thought that Vermont had outlawed slavery. And we had, but if you were under, I think it was under 21, 18 or 21, you could be an indentured servant. So this is just to clarify the law, to clean it up so that it says that we do not support slavery. And not in those terms, but basically that's what it says.
Oh, that's good to hear. Olga, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to add, because my co-host Emily Kornheiser and I recently spoke about both of these propositions on the happy hour, the Montpelier Happy Hour. So Proposition 2 is, as Secretary Condos said, a revision of constitutional language. So it actually says slavery and indentured servitude is prohibited in the state of Vermont. And if you vote yes on your ballot, then that means, yes, you want to see this revision made. If you vote no, then you don't want that revision made. Proposition 2 is reproductive freedom. And while a lot of focus has been put on looking at abortions. It covers a whole spectrum of reproductive rights. And again, if you vote yes, you want that amendment made. If you vote no, you don't want that amendment made. Is that correct? Secretary
You said
Condos?
Proposition 2 for both. It's
Oh, sorry,
Proposition 2 and
Proposition
5.
5, yeah. Or Article 22 is the amendment. So thank you for catching me on that.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from people who are listening in? We can open this up now. And it does not look like we do.
So may I ask a question of, and I'm so sorry, Professor, I didn't catch your first name.
Gyuri Kepes. It's not an easy one.
Thank you. I'm curious, when you're working with students and you're kind of teaching them these new muscles of how to evaluate information, I'm just trying to think, how do we bring this back to our listeners and voters? Like, do you have, step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, do this?
Yes. So I teach information literacy like you would any type of literacy. Like you have to understand kind of the syntax and the grammar, and all that. So I have kind of a 5-step process. I identify the source. So is it a secondhand source? Is it primary source? Is it an anecdote? Does it come as an independent report? Is it an academic scholarly journal? So it's just identifying the type of source, where it's coming from. And then, like you said, finding a variety of sources. So that's in a process. So first identify, where your sources are coming from, and then branch out and look for other sources. And then evaluate, scrutinize, right? Scrutinize the claims. Like, does the logic add up, right? Are they using any fallacies, right? Are they using buzzwords? So really giving them those muscles and those tools, as you put it, to evaluate claims, and and kind of just inoculating them against some of the tools that powerful politicians and media icons and advertisers use to persuade you to essentially to buy a position or a product. So there's a lot that's packed in there, and a lot that we have to unpack. And then just also applying their existing knowledge, what they know about the issues, what they can learn about the issues. And really looking at the sources and really making sure that they understand the position as well, and that they are representing it accurately themselves. So it is an iterative process. I think a lot of back and forth between myself and the student conversation. So it's a lot of work. And a lot of it is just remedial because they didn't get that in high school, or they just spend so much time in front of the screen where they're being bombarded by misinformation, and they need a bit of a pushback from the other side.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Well, I'm out of questions.
I have one for you, Joyce.
Oh dear, what?
Well, you heard from all of us about how to be an informed voter. What's your recommendation to people so they can be informed voters?
I have not got a good answer for that. I think that I am so disgusted with the system that I mostly would talk about moving to Guatemala, but I'm very confused by the system. As Jim said, I'm outraged by the misinformation, not surprised by it, but outraged by it, and how fast it travels and how you can cut through it. I mean, if Joe Biden says he loves his son, all of a sudden the Republicans are saying, aha, that proves that you're corrupt. Really? Okay. I think half of the United States is stupid, just plain dumb to be buying all this stuff. And yet, I mean, who am I to say? So I am not sure how to cut through the crap, really. And so, on the state level, I know the representatives, I know everyone who's running. It may be because I'm a journalist and I've interviewed them, but I see them, I talk to them, I ask questions. Why are you running is a really good question to ask. And I feel that because I live in Vermont, where you have access to everyone, you meet your rep in the supermarket, then it's not a problem here. On the national level, I'm just so horrified, I don't know. We have a question from a flower.
I came to this talk with a notion of what it would be. Instead, it's been far more depressing than I thought it would. And the question that I have, that I came with, I realize is no longer a question, but it's so much in my mind, I'm going to state it anyhow. We've been talking about social media. I have some friends here in Vermont. They're the most wonderful people you want to know. They're kind-hearted, they're intelligent, they certainly care about politics and the environment. But they get all of their news from social media. And there was no way they were going to vote for Trump, but they disliked Hillary, which perhaps many of us did. And social media was absolutely running rampant with lies about Hillary, whatever else you might think of her. And so they threw their vote away, in my opinion. And much difference, but they voted for a third-party candidate. And they're reasonable people, they're intelligent people, but I would say that you can't trust social media. This is not a reasonable source of information. And they said, well, their friends sent it to them and their friends are very reliable. And I had hoped maybe somebody here had a magic bullet of what you can do with an adult. I mean, these are college-educated, mature people. They're not kids, and I don't think they watch TikTok, but they're certainly on Facebook all the time. So that is my question. If anyone has an answer, I would love to hear it, but they were not going to do any research.
So Ellen, this is Jim Condos, and I want to just say that in 2016 and again 2018 and then even again in 2020, one of the things that was found was that there were how shall I put it, nefarious countries that were from foreign countries that were essentially sounding like or trying to sound like Americans, trashing American citizens or American government, their process. This is all part of the misinformation, and it was coming from, I'm going to name some countries because we're in the background. We are kept in the loop as to what's going on from the Department of Homeland Security. I have secret clearance, so I can go to these classified briefings. For instance, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea to a certain extent, they're all trying to influence what's going on in the United States, and they're using social media to do it. Now, 2016, 2018, and even for a time in the 2020, like Facebook and Twitter and others were slow to the dance to start to fight this. But I know that they have taken down hundreds of thousands of, if you want to call them fake membership to their social media posts to remove them. But just as fast as they remove them, they're coming back again. And Yeah, and I think it's slightly different. Like I think what we've been hearing is that the Chinese are trying to influence the elections. What Russia's trying to do is actually influence the credibility or whatever of actual candidates. So they're taking on different approaches. And this is the problem that we're facing, and that's what I was trying to say earlier, that social media is really causing a problem for us, but nobody's going to shut it down. And I think Twitter and Facebook have taken to putting people in jail, so to speak, if they find that they're promoting violence, or if they're really, promoting misinformation. We actually found, not here in Vermont, but we did, nationwide, there were some Facebook posts that said, Republicans vote on Tuesday, Democrats vote on Wednesday. Or there was a blackout, energy blackout in your town. The voting will be extended to 10 o'clock at night. But none of that's true. But unless someone, sees it, and that's the problem. I don't have the staff or the resources to have somebody going over Facebook and Twitter and Instagram or whatever, looking for misinformation. But when we hear of it, we then contact those social media organizations and let them know. But by the time we hear it and send it to them, it's already been seen around the country.
I hear you, and I was aware of all of that. Administration is not being able to get intelligent people who want to do the right thing to believe that it was all fibs or concocted or whatever. So thank you for saying that, and thank you for doing what you do. And thank you for depressing me again.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary Condos, and for the question. You can find credible information on social media. I think the problem is that you can find, for example, you can find the New York Times and Washington Post on Facebook. Problem is when you click on those links, it goes to a paywall. And so those credible sources are not accessible to common folk who can't afford a $300 a year subscription. So our model is really flawed in that way. It's that they're only accessible really to the elite. And we need to democratize information, have it more credible information for citizens in order to have an informed citizenry that our democracy functions more fluidly. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, well, I want to say to that, journalists have to be paid.
Yeah.
So as much as I hate the paywall, I understand why it exists. They can't do their job if they don't have an income. Okay, we have Ricky again. You want to go? Hello?
Yeah, thank you. I have a follow-up question to what Mr. Condos was saying about how maybe he can help with accessing a network to who specialize with trying to prevent the fake Facebook profiles of government officials, because I think that you have a sympathy for government officials being harassed unfairly, and I've been witness to how some high-ranking officers have been bullied a lot by these phishing Facebook profiles that post really inappropriate content. And I've tried myself to contact a lot of the Facebook policy agents, and I think that there may be a necessity to kind of like do maybe like a cyber trail on whoever is creating these profiles, and not just like keep on deleting the profiles, but like to intervene directly with them and ask them like what their problem is. Like, I think they need like psychiatric intervention to help them so that they can move on with their life and do something beyond this harassment. And if you could help establish more of a relationship so that we can do that productively, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. I will say, we have no say in what Facebook or Twitter's policies are or whatever. We can just let them know. And I know that for the last probably 3 years, we have had ongoing conversations through my national association with them, served by both Republicans and Democrats, to try to see if we can do something about it. But their issue is the First Amendment rights issue, and it's I always say to people, it's, you can say as part of the First Amendment, you can yell out fire, but you can't do it in a movie theater. That would be considered wrong and illegal. But I don't know how we get a hold of this and get our hands on it. That's why we continue to tell people to really be informed. Actually, when you think about it, vote by mail does allow people the opportunity to research the candidates. They can sit at their kitchen table with their laptop, research candidates, and decide how to vote. They don't have to walk into a polling place and they have 5 minutes to fill out their ballot. They can actually take their time when they're doing it at home. So there's a lot of different things out there for people to do, and all we recommend is that people just try to be informed and understand, research the candidates, their policies, their statements, and trying to choose the right person.
Amen. Well, I think we're going to close now, unless anyone has something that they want to say. Do you guys want to make closing statements, or have we said everything that we can?
The only thing I would say is your vote is your voice, exercise it.
Okay, then what I want to say is thank you, Jim Condos. I know you are retiring. You are not going to be our Secretary of State after this election. Probably very happy about that. And we are very grateful to you for your steadfast service to the state. And thank you. And thank you, Olga. And thank you, Gyuri. And thank you, BCTV, for hosting us. And
thank you, Joyce, for being a great moderator.
Oh, thank you. And Gyuri, you wanted to say?
I would just like to say thanks for having us. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and like Secretary Condos said, get out and vote.
Yes, get out and vote. Okay, let's cut us off, BCTV. Carry us home.